As far as I understand, we'll start. Yeah, we'll start trial. You're on air. So you'll start with Gerashchenko. No, Anton Gerashchenko already spoke here. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. We are in Ukraine Media Center. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to remind you that our operation has been supported by the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine and Ministry of Internal Affairs. I would like to thank Skyloft Hotel and our whole team working on providing you every day with up-to-date news, latest news from our speakers. And now I'd like to say that the subject of our next briefing is International Court of Justice of United Nations as a tool to bring Russian Federation to international liability for their war crimes. And the speaker here will be Emine Dzhaparova, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. Emine, you're welcome. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I hope that everybody can hear me well. I will try and tell you quickly in 10 to 15 minutes about our strategy and tactics of defending Ukraine's interests in international judiciary institutions. I will describe the time sequence initially, which is important in terms of legal analysis, to understand that we do not consider our current situation separately from what happened in February 2014, when Russian Federation actually invaded, in fact, and units of the Black Sea Fleet of Russian Federation violated all international agreements with Ukraine when they left their permanent locations and tried to carry out the occupation or annexation of sovereign Ukrainian territory. And that initial stage of the aggression culminated in that illegal referendum. We all remember that time when various narratives were used to create so-called the people of Crimea, separate identity, and that so-called people of Crimea decided to join Russian Federation. This is another example of Russian Federation cynically trying to cover their crimes and making fake legal framework for it. After occupation of Crimea in 2014, aggression of Russia spread to continental Ukraine, but due to huge efforts of Ukrainian citizens and then Ukrainian military formations, the aggression was stopped and limited to some territories of Donetsk and Luhansk provinces, and then until the 24th of February this year, when we all woke up in a different new reality, we see that the war has affected each and every Ukrainian family. And this clear understanding of this time sequence is what we see now and what we apply in our judiciary defense. Speaking about war crimes, it's about individual liability, individual criminal liability of persons who committed such crimes, and those are judged by International Criminal Court, and we interact with the ICC since 2014, but that should be a subject of separate discussion. Now let me describe the lawsuit against the Russian Federation submitted in Ukraine in the International Court of Justice, ICJ, of the United Nations. That's against Russia, the Russian Federation as a state, not against its leadership. It's important in that each and every citizen of the Russian Federation should feel their responsibility for allowing their leadership to commit crimes against Ukrainian citizens, Ukrainian civilians. That's what we currently see, and unfortunately, we have to say that International Court of Justice cannot judge on any arguments between states. It can only disagreements between states. The court can only judge situations where the states have submitted to its jurisdiction. It's about bilateral or multilateral international agreements. And in the spring of 2014, since the beginning of the aggression, we started analyzing what sort of opportunities we have. And sometimes we have rather narrow opportunities. Obviously, we cannot use bilateral agreements because Russian Federation would not agree to have those situations tried by that court, because the final judgment would be for us, for Ukraine, not for Russian Federation. So we started analyzing multilateral international treaties. And again, there are rather narrow opportunities because in practice there are two key clusters which could be applied by the International Court to consider lawsuits. And such multilateral international treaties include those against terrorism and some of human rights protection treaties. And among all those opportunities, we chose two well-known conventions, well-known also to the journalists. These are two documents which cover in the broadest terms those crimes committed by the Russian Federation in the occupied territories in Crimea and in some districts of Donetsk and Luhansk provinces. That Convention of 1999 on fighting international terrorism and Convention against all forms of racial discrimination of 1965. And actually, as events have shown, we saw that we were right in our analysis and our logic and strategy. So based on those two conventions, those two treaties, we have said that Russia has been violating the Convention on financing terrorism because it supplies weapons, explosives, funds, training, intangible assets, and so on to so-called Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic, those groups who have been committing terrorist acts in Ukraine. Among the most notorious acts are that MH17 Boeing downing and all those facts mentioned in our documents we submit to the International Court of Justice. Artillery shelling of residential buildings in Mariupol, passenger bus near Volnovakha, artillery shelling against Kramatorsk, explosion during the peaceful march for United Ukraine in Kharkiv, explosion in Stena nightclub in Kharkiv, and we state that innocent civilians have been victims as a result of all those acts. And all those attacks also have had a clear political aim to force Ukraine into direct negotiations with those terrorist groups and to changing its constitutional framework. Then there is that second convention on elimination of all forms of racial discrimination, and we have stated that Russia runs a targeted campaign to destroy the cultural identity and the identity of Ukrainians and Crimean Tatars, kidnapping, selective arrests, and so on. Something that has been routine in occupied Crimea, when Crimea has become a territory of fear, when, for example, all those Crimean Tatar mass media had to leave Crimea, and access to Ukrainian language has narrowed by factors of dozens. There were less than 10 Ukrainian schools, and they have actually, in fact, become Russian-speaking schools, and all those textbooks have been in Russian, and lessons are given in Russian. It has been prohibited to celebrate some important cultural, religious, and other events important for both people. For example, the 18th of March, which is a day that Crimean Tatars when Crimean Tatars would rally every year on Central Square in Simferopol, the anniversary of deportation of Crimean Tatars, and persecution of representatives of Crimean Tatars, like Medjlis. When Medjlis, their body has been prohibited, it has been declared to be a terrorist organization, although it's not even an organization, it's a representative body of the Crimean Tatar people, and their leaders have been prosecuted, and now Crimean Tatars Medjlis has been working in Kyiv in exile. So we have included all those facts in our position statements and explained why we ask the court to apply those two conventions. And on the on 16th of February 2017, on behalf of Ukraine, we submitted a lawsuit to the International Court of Justice against Russian Federation on the violation of those two conventions. And as soon as in 3 months, on the 19th of April 2017, we had first interim victory when the court issued a mandatory order whereby in particular there would be injunctions in that case whereby Russian Federation should restore the activities of the Majlis of Crimean Tatars and restore access for Ukrainian children in Crimea to education in Ukrainian and to Ukrainian language. And of course, Russian Federation has just ignored those mandatory interim decisions, which is typical for Russian Federation. And it's important for us because if somebody believes that Russian Federation is a country that follows some rules, we show that it's not like that. We cannot agree with them. The next important step is when the court establishes whether it has jurisdiction, when the court analyzes all submitted documents, arguments and establishes whether they have a jurisdiction under those two conventions and whether that court can try this case. And on February 8, 2019, we achieved another significant success when the International Court of Justice issued a decision whereby they completely refute all the arguments of the Russian Federation, and they established their jurisdiction in this case and decided to start trying this case on the merits. And now there is a stage where parties exchange written documents, which are called memoranda. We submit our memorandum, the Russian Federation submits their counter-memorandum. And what is important here? For the first time ever, the Russian Federation has to find some way to explain our crimes in writing, including destroying the cultural identity of Crimean Tatars in Crimea. And for example, there are supplies of Buk anti-air missiles and territories of Ukraine not controlled by Ukrainian government, and explain that shelling of residential blocks, residential quarters in Mariupol. So it's about reputation losses for them, because Russian Federation was never forced to do it, and more to do it in writing. What else is important here? Ukraine has been the first country on a global scale that has been party to a court case under that convention on funding of terrorism. No one country would ever use that convention to support their legal position. And so the use of this convention and the results of this process would draw attention from international lawyers worldwide, but also a lot of state parties, because as a result of this case, if you win, then the Russian Federation can be designated as the country that funds terrorism. So Ukraine is the second country that states the violation of all of convention of all forms of racial discrimination by Russia. Before us, Georgia as well, and Qatar against Arab Emirates. And in both cases, the court did not agree to their jurisdiction under this convention. At the moment, there are two more cases, Armenia versus Azerbaijan and Azerbaijan versus Armenia. Those lawsuits are at the very initial stage, so it's quite difficult to forecast what will happen in those cases. And Ukraine we can state that Ukraine has been the only country that has achieved some significant results on this way under this convention, achieved some success. Upon completion of this exchange of written documents, there will be oral hearings. It's difficult to tell what will be the exact date, but as a result of considering those written documents, the International Court will issue their decision on the merits. And on the 26th of February 2022, we applied to the International Court of Justice a new lawsuit against Russia on the violation of Convention on Prevention of Genocide. We have been trying to show that Russia has been manipulating this term, genocide. So they try to use that genocide to justify their position. And within this case, we have been proving that full-scale aggression against Ukraine has been based on aggression, on manipulating this term, genocide. And as you all know, and we know, on the 7th of March, there have been oral hearings. On the 16th of March, we have achieved our first interim success in this case, whereby the International Court of Justice ordered that Russian Federation should immediately stop their military operation and immediately stop any support for those groups they support in Ukraine. Russia immediately declared that they are not going to comply with this decision. Of course, it will not change the situation of the aggressor in any significant way, but of course, civilized countries have received a very important legal message from the highest legal authority, judicial authority, saying that Russian aggression is illegal and cannot be justified. And it fits the political position of all other countries. That's a very important interim decision, very important for us. That's another argument for the global community to increase pressure against Russia in order to bring its conduct into compliance with international law, with rules of international law, with what is called rule-based order. So we can say that international law mechanisms work slowly. Of course, we want to get results faster than we are getting them, but especially when we are talking about the International Court of Justice. But the Ukrainian diplomacy and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs have been decisively defending and fighting for our position. We are confident in our success. And after the 24th of February, when the full-scale war started, it has become more honest, more transparent in terms of the language we use when we say this is a war and how the whole world sees these events in Ukraine. And you know, there is a joke that judges do read newspapers too. So I believe that there are all reasons to state that, again, due to objective situation, we have all proper arguments, and we will be able to prove that this regime in Russia is a barbaric one, the one of military war criminals. And we believe that everybody who is guilty of that should be brought to liability. It has been mentioned many times by Ukrainian President Zelensky and Minister of Foreign Affairs Dmytro Kuleba. And when Russian citizens agree with those criminal actions, it will be an aggravating part of contributing to these events. I am to finish now because I have another Zoom meeting. We can gather your questions. I will be unable to answer them right now. If some of my colleagues from the department could join us, we'll know it in 5 minutes, then they would join us and answer your questions. If they're unable to join the briefing, then we'll collect your written questions and provide you with answers. Thank you, Emine. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Dear friends, if you have any questions, we'll collect them, and then we will contact our colleagues from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I believe that we'll receive answers to all questions. And I'd like to remind you that at 3 p.m. we are to have our next briefing, where we'll have Alexander Motozyanek, press representative of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, who will tell you about the current situation today in the front lines. Thank you and goodbye.